This is the first documentary I am making out of something. These documentaries could be about mainly something that no longer existed or has been discontinued. At this time, I really am talking about that sort of thing. That being Blue Sky Studios. Blue Sky Studios is a now defunct animation studio and was owned by a major movie company at the time and was the second oldest animation studio to Pixar, the most influential out of all. Although I could admit that it would not win in a fight, it was one that deserved better than this. Now let's get on with it! In 1987, there was a group of 6 people founding a company on February 22nd, 1987, which included the face of Chris Wedge. Chris Wedge was an undergraduate at Purchase College studying films and got employed by Magi, an early computer technology software responsible for Synthovision, a software which could replicate the laws of physics to measure nuclear radiation rates of a US government contracts. At MAGI, Chris Wedge managed to make animated commercials and was offered by Disney to work on their movie Tron. Even in the mid-80s, he was producing his own animations, such as Balloon Guy and Tuba's Two Steps. Soon, we all know, Blue Sky Studios was founded by him and 5 other people. Through the 1990s, they had produced countless commercials and onward for such things as Nicktoons and their Blobs idents. They were contributing to other movies. Technically, their first movie was Joe's Apartment, a movie by Warner Brothers and MTV in 1996. They animated the cockroaches, and the movie failed. Some of their contribution movies were being Alien Resurrection, A Simple Wish, Mouse Hunt, Star Trek Insurrection, Jesus' Son, Fight Club, The Sopranos, and Titan AE. Quite a few failed. Soon, in 1998, they explicitly made their own short entitled Bunny. Bunny depicts an elderly widowed rabbit living in a cabin, getting bothered by a moth flying around the place while she is baking a cake. The moth falls into the photograph of her and her late husband on their wedding day, which she accidentally drops into the batter. She puts in the oven. Soon, the oven starts shaking and drops open. The bunny crawls inside and goes face to face with the moth. Suddenly, she is floating to an otherworldly space, gaining moth wings. She is among many other moths drawn to the light, seemingly going to heaven to reunite with her late husband. It ends with the wedding photograph coming to life with Bunny nestling on her husband's shoulder, with 2 moths doing the same. And it ends with credits playing the song Bend Down the Branches by Tom Waits. It even won an Academy Award for the time. It is sad that it was the only Blue Sky project to ever get an Academy Award. Soon, a company depending on an animation studio needed them, which was my favourite movie studio, 20th Century Studios, or Fox. They acquired them so that they could actually have their project officially happening after their original studio, Fox Animation Studios, went defunct in 2000 due to the failure of their movie Titan AE. You know, Blue Sky was involved in this, I told you, and was directed by Don Bluth, who also made another thing at Fox Animation Studios in 1997, which was Anastasia, along with Gary Goldman. That project, Ice Age, was going to be animated 2D, just like them, but it got saved by Blue Skies themselves. Now let's get on with that movie. Ice Age, the movie that came in 2002, started it all and became a franchise that the studio is known for, starring Ray Romano, John Leguizamo, and Dennis Leary portraying respectively Manny the Mammoth, Sid the Sloth, and Diego the Saber-toothed Tiger. The story is about the many prehistoric animals migrating, preparing for the Ice Age, and there is Manny walking in the opposite way around, and the reason is terrifying, but is stopped by Sid, who got on his nerves quite so. Then there is Diego, part of a pack led by the antagonist Soto, about to hunt down the humans or Neanderthals because they hunted down a lot of the population of their kind. The pack chased down a woman named Nadia and her baby Roshan. Diego left the pack because he seemed to have lost his edge and joins Manny and Sid, who then they become a herd. As soon as they find the baby and his mother, who did not survive unfortunately, they go on an adventure while having to look after Roshan, trying to send him back to his tribe. At one point, they slide through an ice tunnel where Sid comes across some frozen things. Piranhas, a dinosaur, the evolution of a sloth, and a UFO, which will play an important part, which will keep reminding you about later. Soon, they are in a cave. Sid is looking at cave paintings of a family of mammoths, which turned out to be Manny's family, a mate and a child, who were hunted down by humans. No wonder Manny was so moody. Manny also gets a change of heart, knowing that he can protect Roshan and keep him safe. Soon, on their journey, they come across Soto again, who Diego fights and Soto dies with icicles falling on him. Here's a fact! Diego was originally going to die, but it was changed due to it being upsetting to test audiences. Soon, the Neanderthals find him and are given back Roshan. They do not hunt down the animals, but respect them for looking after Roshan and keeping him safe. The herd eventually walk to where the prehistoric animals are going. There is a subplot centered around a saber-toothed squirrel named Scrap, whose vocal noises are done by Chris Wedge himself. Said by Sid as an important part of what I'm going to talk about in Ice Age later. Besides that, there are many countless Blue Sky shorts and on, but we do not have time to speak about them. Their next movie 3 years later is Robots, a movie in 2005 starring Ian McGregor and Robin Williams, etc., and is my favourite Blue Sky movie out of them all. It is about a robot, Rodney Copperbottom, aspiring to be an inventor and employed at Big World Industries. Big World, portrayed by Mel Brooks, is the hero who says,
"You can shine no matter what you're made of."
and he seems to be some of those heroes who are safe to meet in person. But Big World Industries has been taken over by Phineas T. Ratchet, whose spare parts for outmoded robots discontinued for new upgrades with a new motto.
With a new slogan.
Why be you when you can be you?
With his mother, Madame Gasket, who recycles scrap metal into ingots and in her chop shop. With Bender, Rodney meets the Rusties, a group of outmoded robots who are looked after by a woman named Aunt Fanny. Rodney and his girl, Cappy, find Big World in his mansion, who resigned due to what Ratchet did. Later, Fender's stuck in the chop shop, getting changed into female parts, an ugly sister to Viper. They are all fighting against Ratchet and Gasket, with Fender doing a dance to Britney Spears. And Ratchet is chained up like his father. In the end, Big World declares Rodney Copperbottom as his successor and gets his father, Herb, to be a musician, which was his dream. He is given a flugelhorn, performing Jane Brown's Get Up Off of That Thing, with Diesel, who finally got a voice box singing. Which is a reasonable dance party ending trope. It is my favourite Blue Sky movie because it is a Pixar-esque concept. A mechanical universe where the whole society is robots. Like you never saw that before, and the robots seem to act human. They are just like us, and would seem better than Pixar's Cars because you know how reproduction works there, and I would enjoy all that innuendo in it. It is even teaching about recycling, reusing, and having aspirations whatsoever. Their most original movie. 1 year later, there is a sequel. Did you know Robot was plotted to have a sequel? It did not happen in the end, and it is at best acceptable. They were most focused on Ice Age with Ice Age 2, The Meltdown. Remember when Sid met the frozen piranhas and that line at the end of the predecessor? Well, this is what is happening here. In this, there is an event of global warming, with many of the mammals evacuating, leaving many afraid that he will be the last of his kind. Soon, they are met with another mammoth, Ellie, voiced by Queen Latifah, who thinks she is an opossum, just like her adoptive brothers, Crush and Eddie, both voiced by Sean William Scott and Josh Peck, who may seem irritating, but we need to remember that they took care of Ellie when she was a lost calf. She even learnt skills from them, and she would not be living happily without them. Gradually, she is discovering who she really is, a mammoth, like Manny, who had a crush on her but was afraid that she would be replacing his deceased family. After being in danger of the antagonist, Creatius and Maelstrom, there is a parade of mammoths walking down, proving to Manny that he is not alone and agrees to be with Ellie. Opossum enough for each other. In Scrat's story, he has a near-death experience, but Sid saves his life. This is my favourite Ice Age movie, intriguing with the plot about global warming, a very scary topic, feeling worried that you may be alone and discovering who you really are.
Hi everybody, I'm Sid, the extinct giant sloth from Ice Age: The Meltdown, the movie that's opening this weekend, but that's not why I'm here. Okay, I'm being told that is why I'm here. We want you to see Ice Age: The Meltdown. You know what? I think that's a mistake. I think we should just lie and act like it's a coincidence. That's alright, okay, never mind. Coming up next, Malcolm in the Middle. You know what that king of the hill needs? Yep, Sid. You know, that boy ain't right. Sid here from Ice Age: The Meltdown. The Meltdown, go Meltdown. Coming up next, enjoy a show that's been on since before I was extinct, The Simpsons. Oh, I see. I thought it was called The Wart at Home. The Wart at Home. I save all my old warts at home. It's a coincidence, huh? As a matter of fact, I have a wart right here. It seems today that all you see is violence and movies and sex on TV. But where are those good old-fashioned values on which we used to rely? Lucky is a Family Guy, and he's coming up next. Sid again. That's right. Hope you're enjoying this great night of sitcoms. Sitcoms? Get it? Got it. Okay, never mind. Coming up next is Free Ride. All those good jokes, I don't even get them. Sid here from Ice Age: The Meltdown. All right, here's a clip. Who picked that clip? I really know that guy. Okay, I'm being told to shut up and read the cue cards. Fox Network. Maybe should have named it for an animal that doesn't completely suck, like the Sloth Network. Now that's got a ring to it. For more of me, watch Fox this Sunday.
2 years later, and 1 year after The Simpsons movie, in 2008, Blue Sky did their first successful adaptation of a book, which is Dr. Seuss's Horton Hears a Who. This was the first animated Dr. Seuss adaptation of a movie, 5 years after The Cat in the Hat, my favourite Dr. Seuss movie, alongside Audrey Geisel's ban on live-action Dr. Seuss adaptations due to its heavily negative reception, and was the highest-rated Dr. Seuss movie yet. It has a more extended story than the book, in which Horton is leading a field trip of children and discovers a speck of dust on a flower with little creatures called Who's living on it, which is Whoville, and there is a mayor with his 96 daughters alongside the oldest, smallest and quietest of all, Jojo, who the mayor will have succeed him. Horton can talk to the mayor and the mayor can talk to Horton. However, somebody does not believe that, being Jane the sour kangaroo, who homeschools her son Rudy. Soon, Horton loses the flower or speck of dust, and then he does find it, but gets imprisoned, and the sour kangaroo is about to drop it into the fire. But it would be stopped by getting all the Who's using their voices and noise to prove that here! But it is not enough. Now the sour kangaroo believes that a person is a person, no matter how small, and they all sing. The movie stars Jim Carrey as Horton, one of his very few voice roles, and was not his first Dr. Seuss movie. He was also the Grinch, remember? And Steve Carell voiced the mayor before he was grew in the Despicable Me franchise by Illumination, which Chris Meledandri founded in 2007. He used to work at 20th Century Animation. Felt like a want. And I prefer Blue Sky over Illumination. But without Illumination, we would not have had the Lorax! Well, this really does go down in history of 20th century animation. It seemed that Blue Sky had the same pattern of movie lines as Pixar. Its first franchise movie, 3 years later, an original, 1 year later, a sequel, 2 years later, and an original. Until 2009, it broke when Blue Sky came with Ice Age 3, Dawn of the Dinosaurs. When it comes to those who like the Ice Age sequels, this is a popular one. The plot is about Manny and Ellie about to be having a child. Manny is obviously worried. Diego is thinking of leaving the herd, which kind of makes us emotional. And the big part is Sid, who takes 3 abandoned eggs, looking after them as his own. Soon the eggs hatch. The mother T-Rex finds them, and Sid, taking them somewhere, which is the Lost World. So the herd must come there to find him. And entering the Lost World, they find a one-eyed weasel named Buckwild, voiced by Simon Pegg, who has spent his time fighting a T-Rex named Rudy, who lost his tooth to him. Buck had his tooth for a sword, which is a threat to the others. Soon, Ellie gives birth to their daughter, who they name Peaches, a code name, since welcoming her to the Ice Age. Scrap also has a distinct story, falling for a female counterpart, Scratay, and almost forgetting about his snot. The best line of it was also, this is the highest grossing movie out of Blue Sky movies. But in 2010, they were the only ones who did not have a movie there, whilst other studios did movies at that time, but not Blue Sky. But is that technically true? Hey, do you know why I put this logo there? Here is an amazing fact. Blue Sky Studio was responsible for this logo. The 20th Century Fox logo, when they were celebrating their 75th anniversary. It was first seen on Avatar, which is a very high-grossing movie. That was wonderful to have your own animation studio animate your logo. Like, what if Illumination was to do a Universal logo? It is also the same case with the Searchlight Pictures logo. Also, if you look closely, you can see an Ice Age billboard with Scrat on it. It is an Easter egg. And they could have done more. Soon, they made a movie, and made movies more regularly than ever in the next year. In 2011, they made Rio. Rio is a movie produced by Carlos Saldana, a man who was close working in Blue Sky Studios. Like, he co-directed Robots and Ice Age, a bird movie about birds, starring Jesse Eisenberg, seemingly his only voice role, and Anne Hathaway. It focuses on an orphan Spixmacore originating from Rio de Janeiro, and before he is smuggled to Moose Lake of Minnesota, where he is found by a female named Linda Gunderson, voiced by Leslie Mann, who are best friends for 15 years running a bookstore, until an orphanologist named Tulio Montero, voiced by a very sexy man named Rodrigo Santoro, who who also voiced him in the Portuguese dub, telling them that
Very special bird. In fact, as far as we know, Blue is the last male of his kind.
Really?
Yes, and recently we found a female, and our hope is to bring the two of them together to save their species.
do meet in the Veterans Place. Mating especially worked with
Naturally.
Yeah, sing it, Lionel.
Wow, that was fast.
Lionel Rich works every time.
Soon, they go missing when an orphaned boy, Fernando, voiced by Jake Teosindin, smuggled him for Marcel, the antagonist. They meet many other characters like Nigel, voiced by Jermaine Clement, who is said to be the villain, but I do not see him as much of an antagonist, more like an accessory for the antagonist. They are also met by Pedro and Nico, voiced by will.i.am and Jamie Foxx, a toucan family, and a bulldog named Louise, voiced by Tracy Morgan. Poor Fernando did not like serving Marcel, so he worked with the two humans to find them, then going to a carnival where the humans get some time to shine.
I look ridiculous, don't I?
Say you, say me, say it for always. That's the way it should be.
They notice the birds and almost lose them to Marcel, but luckily Blue and Jewel managed to get all the birds out of the smuggler's plane. In the end, Fernando gets adopted by Linda and Tulio. They are one big happy family. Blue and Jewel made babies and life is a party again. I believe that was the strongest Blue Sky movie. I swear it is moralizing how some species belong in the wild and should not be pets. It was also a love letter to Carlos Saldana's hometown, Rio de Janeiro. A year later, look what we have again! Ice Age 4 Continental Drift. When you argue that the Ice Age franchise should have ended there, you are technically wrong to me because you are sleeping on the ice tunnel scene foreshadowing lines in the movie like when Ellie talked about teenage years in 2009. And here it is. It takes place years after the predecessor, where Peaches, voiced by Kiki Palmer, is now a teenager who is ready to go away on her own, falling into the Brat Pack, two of which are voiced by rappers. Steffi is voiced by Nicki Minaj, and Drake is voiced as Ethan. Manny grounds Peaches for apparently being in somewhere she should not, and they have an argument. Well, I believed she was too good for them anyway. Although Ellie is supportive, I understand why Manny is overprotective. Soon, we also meet Sid's family and Granny, who abandoned him for being a nuisance to them. Soon, continents fall apart by scrap. He just wanted to have his nut, separating Sid, Diego, Granny, and Manny from his family, and nobody knows whether he will see them again after the storm. They turn out to be on the boat of Captain Gert, voiced by Peter Dinklage, and his crew, one of which is Shira, voiced by Jennifer Lopez, who then becomes Diego's lover, and he has a really cool shanty.
Here you are on a boat, you're adrift, you're afloat, and not even sick, you're stuck. Well, I don't want to go, but I would like to note that you're in luck. You can save by the ape that rules these waters, so forget about your wives and daughters. First mate, introduce me to them.
I, Captain Gut. He's the big and scary, elegant and hairy, fear inspiring, you igniting, moving, stealing, but not appealing, undisputed master of the seas.
That's me, that's me, that's me. Okay. I'm a primate pirate pioneer, and these are my brave buccaneers, all of whom were once lost souls like you.
It's true. He rescued us. He saved our butts. For that, we owe our lives to Gut, and assuming he doesn't kill you, you will owe him too.
kill them? Me? No. Well, at least not this very large, useful mammoth.
Hey, hands off.
Anyway, here we are on a ship moving at quite a clip through the ever-shifting ice.
Come along on a trip.
That's good advice.
In a world that's going under, to survive you must learn to blunder. Luckily, that's my field of expertise.
He's the best.
He's a golden key.
You really should be leaving.
We gotta get going.
Bobsleigh. How we pick up staying?
Undisputed, uncontested, most used to
Yeah, you guessed it, master of the seas.
Oh, please.
That's me. It's who? That's the thing I do. It's me.
Meanwhile, Peaches, Ellie and the rest must trek to the land bridge, back on the mainland. Soon, they find each other, while Captain Gut takes them hostage. But in the end, Manny defeats Gut, who gets eaten by a clam, and they are all reunited. I got exhausted while telling the story. Some good reasons I like about it, and that is why a movie is worth a try. It's because Captain Gut seems to be the best villain out of all of Ice Age, with his kidnapping, holding hostages, and sometimes hurting who he's brought aboard. Also, there is a song.
We are not your ordinary family, but we can all agree that we are
Close as close can be.
So it don't matter what it looks like, we look perfect to me. We got every kind of love, I'm just so lucky indeed. They can keep on talking, it don't matter to me. 'Cause we are. Okay, so the link said a chain makes a strain.
Oh, the father!
A Simpsons short called The Longest Daycare came with it, and it was liked more than the movie itself. A year before that, Ice Age had a TV special called Ice Age: A Mammoth Christmas, but I do not have time to speak about it. Things were getting a shake-up in 2013. 20th Century Studios signed a deal with DreamWorks Animation, my favourite animation studio alive, to distribute their movies like The Croods, seemingly to both Blue Sky Studios themselves. Also, Blue Sky Studios had updated their logo, with Scrat as their mascot. And that came with a distinct movie of theirs in that same year. Epic! A distinct movie from Blue Sky Studios because of its more mature tone and cast, and was directed by Chris Wedge himself. It is based off a book called Leaf Men by William Joyce and was a tribute to his late daughter. In this, a 17-year-old girl, MK, voiced by Amanda Seyfried, goes to live with her father, Professor Bombar, voiced by Jason Sudeikis, somebody interested in what is going on in the grassy forest after her mother dies. What Bombar sees is a tiny little kingdom, which is led by Queen Tara, voiced by Beyonce, whose acting I find it funny, along with Nod, a training Leafman warrior, voiced by Josh Hutcherson, and his guardian, Ronan, voiced by Corin Lynn Farrell. Soon, Queen Tara is killed by the Boggin leader Mandrake, because his son was killed. MK then gets shrunken into the tiny little kingdom to fight against Mandrake. There is also a toad, Bullo, voiced by Pitbull, who always sounds like he is singing or rapping, even when he is just talking. And 2 comic relief gastropod mollusks. A way to defeat Mandrake is to play the bat sounds on Bombar's iPod to lure Mandrake's bats away. Ronan is almost defeated by Mandrake. Then the pod served by Queen Tara blooms in the moonlight, giving Mandrake a fate by consuming him into a tree. Queen Tara's ghost makes a flower child the queen. MK and Nod, who is now a Leafman, along with the snail and slug, share a kiss, and she can be in touch with him domestically. It's so underrated, but I wanted to shine light on it. Fact! Chris Wedge disliked many parts of it, and the title in other dubs is better than what the English dub put out. Then, Chris Wedge took a break from Blue Sky Studios to work on a live-action CGI hybrid movie, Monster Trucks, by Paramount and Nickelodeon, which came in 2017. Not just that, it seemed Ice Age was not alone with Rio 2. Rio is the only Blue Sky movie besides Ice Age to have a sequel. Rio 2. It mattered to me given that it was the first Blue Sky movie that I ever owned on DVD since 2014 on my 2014 vacation. Do you remember those L'Oreal Kids bottles? Obviously, it is inferior. It takes place 3 years after the predecessor, where Jewel is afraid that their 3 children, Carla, Bia and Diego, are being too domesticated and unable to fly like Blue used to be. They fly off meeting others of their kind. They are not alone, including Jewel's relatives, her father Eduardo and Aunt Mimi, who are unfortunately disapproving of Blue and make Jewel be with an old friend of hers, Roberto, voiced by Bruno Mars. And they have gotten a lot of hate for that. I say they should have been more aware of what Blue's lifestyle was like. Then there is a talent competition on in the Amazon called Amazon Untamed, and you will like Nigel's cover of I Will Survive with a poison dart frog Gabby, who turns out not to be poisonous.
It is I who have the floor. Weren't you the one who tried to hurt me with the pie? Lay down and die. Well, I will survive as long as I know how to hate. I know I'll stay alive. I've got all my life to live.
I've got all my love to give.
I will survive.
You will survive.
I will survive.
We will
I'm
survive.
a survivor. Like an eye of a tiger, turning the cane and eating my father. You staying alive, well, I'm staying alive. Watch me sick when I bit my saliva like, ooh, you never see
And then a battle between bluebirds and redbirds. Now, onto the human story. Linda and Tulio are now married and on an expedition to save birds. But then there is a logger, more evil than Marcel, who without reason is cutting down the forest for business, mistreating his co-workers, and will be out to get them. I think the focus on the humans was way more interesting than the birds' focus.
What? What? We're here on our honeymoon. We're actually just heading back to join the tour. It's a karaoke night. Come along, honey. Moon River isn't going to sing itself.
Soon, they are caught and tied to a tree, and all the birds of a feather have to stick together. When Blue finds out what happened to the couple, he unties them, and it's all a final battle between the loggers and the good ones. Obviously, the good ones win, and Big Boss is eaten by a snake, and they promise.
This place stays safe, right, Blue?
What I describe about it is a movie that is worthy but inferior, because I found it exciting to see how those people in the movie were doing. A favourite to many, which is the Peanuts movie. Throughout the years, the Peanuts, the life about Charlie Brown and the dog Snoopy, are well known and loved with their comics and their TV specials with infamous gags and characters. So it was amazing that Blue Sky could adapt it into a movie, being ahead of its time with a distinct different animation style for its feel. Just like when DreamWorks did adaptations of Dav Pilkey's work. In the story, both Charlie Brown and Snoopy have dreams. For Charlie Brown, it's to be noticed by the little red-haired girl, who have a few things in common and for Snoopy to be a World War I flying ace and save his loved one Fifi. Same voice as Gabby, who is Christine Chenoweth from the Red Baron. Now, back to Charlie Brown. He must write a report on the book War and Peace on his own due to the girl being unavailable. Another thing is that he accidentally got his test swapped off Peppermint Patty, and the other children believe him to be the one who scored perfectly on his test. But then, when he is about to accept his medal in a school assembly, everybody learns that it was actually not him who got the perfect score, but Peppermint Patty. He was being honest about it, but he was let down, losing his popularity once again. Even worse, his book report is shredded by the Red Baron, making him admit that they both failed the assignment. Then it's the summer holidays, and the little red-haired girl chooses him as her pen pal as a school project, and before she leaves, Charlie Brown must express his feelings about her for summer camp, and the little red-haired girl admires for who he is. He is done clean by everybody. We love it for the charming characters, the aesthetics, like children doing the voice roles, and the sound of adults who we hear but do not see. And it even has a single you know so well, which is called Better When I'm Dancing by Meghan Trainor. This guy had a win with this, but was severely injured with everybody's least favourite Ice Age movie, Ice Age 5 Collision Course. The fifth instalment to the franchise with a fallen execution. In this, Peaches is set to marry a harmless mammoth named Julian, voiced by Adam Devine. Although Manny doesn't feel like it, he got clingy. You may obviously understand, but it has gone too far. Also, Buck Wild is back with an inanimate pumpkin named Bronwyn for a daughter, who gave an egg back to a dinosaur. Other dinosaurs stole it. One of them was Gavin, voiced by Nick Offerman. Buck warns everybody about an asteroid coming, and it does on Manny and Ellie's wedding anniversary, and they are met with Geotopia, a place of creatures who can stay young, such as Brooke, another sloth, voiced by Jessie J. Then Sid accidentally damages it, making the mold. Yeah, Gavin and them want to get rid of them and survive. Then everybody must throw the gems into the volcano, which erupts, then saving them from the asteroid. Then the crystals fall into the hot springs, where the Geotopians stay even younger. Even Granny, who becomes young again. Then Peaches and Julian get married. And Brooke returns to sing, which is the best part of the movie, My Superstar. And the subplot, Scrat is absorbed into a spaceship, finds Mars, which used to have life apparently, and he will probably be back to Earth. This movie was hated for its characterization, story and humour whatsoever. It really could do with improvements with a lot of it, and it even grows lower than expected, making them lose the competition with Illumination's The Secret Life of Pets and Pixar's billion-dollar, well-anticipated grossing movie, Finding Dory, which, unpopular opinion, wasn't that necessary and did not need to exist. Being critical, I am neutral on it. Now, I know you are speaking about how you say Ice Age should have ended on a certain point before Collision Course came, along with a franchise being milked dry. But you should have been careful with what you have said! Why do you keep on sleeping on that one scene in the first movie which were showing that they were going to happen in general alongside quotes from the movie foreshadowing the next one? They likely have happened because viewers could have been interested with a story involving the Hood and that specific object. And it would not make sense if the franchise stopped in the middle of that. Some people need to know that sequels happen for a reason. Couldn't they have warned us about sequels from the start? Couldn't they put a cliffhanger in their movies? Before that was another TV special called Ice Age: The Great Escapade. But once again, like the Christmas special, I do not have time to speak about it. Irrelevant, but NBC Universal acquired DreamWorks in the same year, which ruined the chance for 20th to release a sequel to The Croods. But a sequel did come in 2020 and was distributed by Universal. Two of the cast have done a role in a Blue Sky movie. However, 20th did have a place to release a movie by Blue Sky which is called Ferdinand. Remember when Carlos Saldana made a movie dedicated to his hometown, which is Rio? Well, he did it again. This time it is Spain and tells a childish but sweet and lovable story about Ferdinand the Bull, based on a children's book. It tells the story of a calf who, with other bulls, living in Casa del Toro, and he is but different to the others because he would rather not fight but smell flowers. And don't they know their fathers are taken to fight in the bull ring? Soon, he is found and raised by a girl named Nina and her father. Soon, when he has grown up and voiced by John Cena, still wants to go to the flower festival at Ronda, although he is too big to go. But he does anyway and causes havoc. Then he is taken back to Casa del Toro, where there are the other bulls, in addition a goat named Loop, voiced by Kate McKinnon, being supportive along with 3 quadruplet hedgehogs. One of them is missing, and horses. One scene, which is a dance scene, is so stupid it is smart. Then Ferdinand would be chosen by El Primero to be fought against, his final one. Soon, all the animals leave, steal a truck, and there is a chase around in Madrid before Ferdinand is unfortunately and finally at the bull ring. He sits down and has a carnation crushed beneath his hoof with a look on his face showing who he really is, opposing the audience against bullfighting. Soon, all the animals that Ferdinand and all the animals live on Nina's farm happily ever after, with the third quadruplet hedgehog being found. There is much goodness in this movie, even if some people consider it to be mediocre at worst. But that movie was close to an event that put my life in the fall. On December the 14th of 2017, the Walt Disney Company would be acquiring 21st Century Fox with its asset, which was all completed in March of 2019. The purchase came with the animation studio itself, Blue Sky. It was rather controversial. I cannot blame those who believe so, since Disney is rigid on things, meaning 20th could not do any adaptation on things like The Sims or Play-Doh, which is very sad, and I could do a hot take on it. Also, they did not have a movie in 2018, but at least Blue Sky could still make a movie. That being Eyes in Disguise, an awesome movie directed by Nick Bruno and Troy Quane, which starred Tom Holland, who was Walter Beckett, and Will Smith, who was Lance Sterling. This is Will Smith's second and superior voice role after being Oscar in DreamWorks' Shark Tale, 15 years before this movie. The plot is about a beloved secret agent, Lance, who is on a mission to recover an attack drone from Japanese arms dealer Katsu Kimura. Soon he is fired. Somebody stole his identity. When the suitcase is empty, he comes across a young, geeky scientist, Walter Beckett, whose late mother believes his crazy, weird and non-threatening inventions would do great things to the world. Walter uses biodynamic concealment on Lance, and he turns into a pigeon. They must go down to resort in Playa del Carmen of Mexico to track down Kimura, where he uses truth serum on him. My favourite invention he invented. It tells that Killian is in Venice. Killian is the main villain of the story, the terrorist with a robot arm who took Lance's identity. He is the most intimidating villain of Blue Sky history. Before the HTUV capture them again, one of those is Marcy, who was aware of Walter's mother's death, tries to convince Walter to turn Lance in. And soon, the duo find the HTUV drone, trying to retrieve, but Killian comes back with Lance's identity once again, preparing to kill Walter. They go into a submarine. Lance lays an egg, and he must return to his normal self with an antidote. Walter is left behind in a submarine. Lance is captured by Killian, who sends drones to target everyone as revenge for killing his crew in Lance's past mission. Walter survives and Lance saves him by using the inflatable hug on Killian, who seems to have lost his evilness with the red eye turning blue. Although they saved the day, they got triple fired, but are rehired for Walter's ways of stopping villainy peacefully. It was an amazing movie, creative concept, awesome scenes, cheesy jokes like
Hydrogen bond.
witch work, and the best one being
I peed in the pool.
I wish the Simpsons short Playdate with Destiny came with that instead of Pixar's Onward, also starring Tom Holland. I think Spies in Disguise is more awesome than Onward. I can agree that the movie was critically acclaimed, but still, Blue Sky had an injury because it was a box office disappointment for a movie be released in Christmas of 2019. Really didn't deserve it. Maybe it could do with the coronavirus pandemic. And the coronavirus pandemic did not just affect our lives, it affected the economy too. Like movies would make less money than they used to at the box office. It affected Disney too. And because of that, it turned no longer sustainable to have 2 more animation studios running, meaning that they had to close at least one of their animation studios. Unfortunately, that animation studio was the one that we are talking about. In February of 2021, the news was broken that Disney was officially set to close down Blue Sky Studios, which was upsetting, and 2 months later, when it was ceasing operations and was almost a decade when Rio was released, Chris Wedge posted a message on Blue Sky's social media account saying, Scrat was the first character to appear in Blue Sky's first movie, Ice Age. Like him, we were reaching for something that might have been unattainable. Yet time after time, both we and Scrat have managed to get our arms around versions of that elusive acorn. Unfortunately, it's not possible to hold on to anything forever. We've had more fun bringing our movies to life than anyone should be allowed. We hope you've been able to feel some of that joy. Thank you from the bottom of our Blue Sky collective hearts for being with us all those years. I reckon Chris Wedge was crying when saying that. Even their social media account still exists, and the message was their last post and were inactive since, with some commenters revisiting and saying, "Come back," or "Thank you for the memories." At least I was cheered up when I watched Ron's Gone Wrong, a lovely animated movie distributed by 20th Century Studios in the year Blue Sky went defunct. It was animated by Locksmith Animation via Double Negative. Locksmith signed a distribution deal with 20th to bolt Blue Sky due to their losses when NBC Universal bought DreamWorks, and it was their only movie 20th distributed before they went to Warner Brothers since. Now, on the Blue Sky side, Disney made a social media post featuring the characters of Ice Age, now that they owned them, saying, "The coolest cast in prehistory," which caused outrage in people so unforgiving them and refusing to believe that it closed due to the economic impact of the coronavirus, who reposted the post, reminding them that they posted things from the company that they acquired and shut down, and one had reminded them that they had cancelled a movie that was anticipated for. It would have been better if 20th Century Studios uploaded this instead. Nimona! A movie based off the webcomic of the same name by N.D. Stevenson, being developed since 2015 and was delayed multiple times since Disney acquired 21st Century Fox, and would finally be released in January of 2022, but was cancelled due to the closure. It was upsetting. We will go back to it. And in January of 2022, a spin-off of Ice Age entitled The Ice Age Adventures of Buckwild was made and released for Disney Plus, which is Disney's streaming service, which was not animated by Blue Sky Studios, but by another animation studio located in Vancouver of Canada, which is Bardell Animation, who also animated the animated Diary of a Wimpy Kid series, also for Disney Plus. Unfortunately, we do not like their animation. Sorry. Not just that, but there are also things that we do not like about it. Those being, the whole cast has been replaced with the only one. Heck, John Leguizamo belongs in Disney's Encanto as Bruno Madrigal for this. The returning one being Simon Pegg as Buckwild. He is supposed to be the main focus according to the title, but no, it is Crash and Eddie, worse than ever, who want to be independent from Ellie, so they go away from the herd into the Lost World and find Buckwild, and having to fight a pathetic dinosaur villain, Orson. There are some nonsensical things of it, such as the absence of characters like Peaches, Granny, Shira, Julian or Brooke, and worst of all, Scrat! It was so horrible. Simon Pegg later mocked the film after its negative reception while making and during his appearance at the 75th British Academy Film Awards. The actor gave a speech where he advised not to laugh while talking about terrible disaster movies after discovering Don't Look Up, saying, So best to avoid laughing while avoiding terrible disaster movies. If you want to do that, I can recommend a terrible animated disaster film that I voiced and starred in, and it is on Disney Plus. It's called The Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild. Please don't watch this film in my country. You should probably avoid that movie, so we can accept that this is something very bad and unnecessary. You would rather be watching Ice Age 5 Collision Course than that. And speaking of Scrat's absence, it was argued that Disney had lost the rights to Scrat. This is because long ago, there was a woman named Ivy Supersonic who had this character named Scrat, just like Scrat, and there was a war between them because of it, and that she had now had the rights of a character at the time. Maybe she lost in court. But soon, it was confirmed not to be true when there was a mini-series, also in 2022, entitled Scrat Tales for Disney+. From all the Fox projects Disney has milked into their banner for the streaming service, like the Bardell projects, Home Sweet Home Alone, Night at the Museum, Kamara Rises Again, and at worst a self-promotional crossover Simpsons shorts, this one was not so bad at all, like the Percy Jackson series. It was made remotely by Blue Sky Studios themselves, but via a different software, that is Renderman. The series consisted of 6 episodes all about Scrat and his newly discovered son, Baby Scrat, and that send-off message came after the final episode, not the end. Soon, there really was the end. A YouTube video by Finale, a former Blue Sky worker, in which Scrat finally has the nuts. Let's see it. It does make you cry. It can satisfy people, but us, we know that it marked the life and was a send-off in their own terms. Maybe they realised Blue Sky may not have time to complete Nimona during the time, so that will be the reason, since apparently they made it right before the closure. Very later, there was some news about the end. Maybe a timeless style is that Scritty officially has the nut at the end of the movie and short with the end being that there are no more nuts left in the Ice Age. They'll spend quality time with Baby Scrat. And now, remember the cancelled Nimona? We are going to talk about it right now. Around the time of Scrat finally having the nut, it had been confirmed that Nimona would be revived by a film company named Annapurna Pictures, founded by a filmmaker, Megan Ellison. That company now had an animation division founded by a former Blue Sky worker using double negative to animate it, doing it from the small fraction that Blue Sky had left off since its closure. It was all done in late 2022, directed by the Spies in Disguise duo, but it was Patrick Osborne originally, and it was released in June the 30th of 2023 as a movie for Netflix. Now, do you want to know about the story? Well, you know because I had to. There is a medieval futuristic kingdom protected for over a millennium by knights established by a legendary heroine, Glorith, who defeated the great black monster. Soon, there'll be a commoner, Ballastar, voiced by Riz Ahmed, set to be knighted by Queen Valorin, changing the tradition of who can be knighted, saying anyone can be a hero. When he is given his sword, it has a laser and shoots Queen Valorin, killing her. Ballista is disliked by everybody, even his boyfriend Ambrosius. Now he has become a fugitive. Soon he meets Nimona, the millennium-old teenager voiced by Chloe Grace Moretz, who can shapeshift, becoming a psychic, and about to have his name cleared. Then they get Diego, who knows the truth via a video, showing that the director, who did not want monsters getting into the kingdom and seemingly not wanting the tradition distorted, was really the one who killed Queen Valorin. She swapped the sword for a laser one. The director then confesses it, being recorded and everybody watches. Back in the past, Nimona was just a shape-shifting girl who befriended Goloric in her childhood until the other villagers believed she was a monster, and that is when Goloric did what she did.
Go back to the shadows from whence you came.
It turned out to be poor Nimona who was the great black monster, transforming into it, which would terminate the director. Nimona as the monster would be defeated if the director used the fire cannon, which Ambrosius opposes of, and she uses the laser sword, which is the one killing Queen Valorin. Thankfully, Nimona did manage to kill the director, and unfortunately herself. She and Ballista are declared heroes. We see Balla and Ambrosius with the most romantic LGBTQ relationship that I met, which, let's just say, Disney was afraid of doing so. And when he goes back to his old place, Nimona comes back, much to Ballista's surprise and joy. I am no Netflix person. That was why I ordered it on a Blu-ray. But I declare this movie as excellent, with its crazy elements, like how the director was wearing angelic coloured clothing as contrast to Nimona becoming that great black monster, Batman on a whole new level, and what that kingdom aspect, specific type of brands, a Monopoly-like game, and a public information film saying, if you see something, slay something. Megan Ellison and her company loved it so much. She was the one who conceived it. Speaking of Annapurna Animation, many people from Blue Sky work there. Even Chris Wedge himself. They are working on Stray, based on her video game, and Foo, standing for Fish Out of Water. There are even references tributing to Blue Sky. A swan singing tribute. Now, do you want to see the other Easter eggs in the full-on Blue Sky movies?
Believe your eyes, if 10 million fireflies lit up the world as I fell asleep, 'cause they fill the open air and leave teardrops everywhere. You'd think me rude, but I would just stand and stare. I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turns slowly. It's hard to say that I'd rather stay awake when I'm asleep, 'cause everything is never as it seems. 'Cause I get 1,000 hugs from 10,000 lightning bugs as they tried to teach me how to dance. A foxtrot above my head, a sock hop beneath my bed, a disco ball is just hanging by a thread. I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turns slow.
about the next chapter to this. Let's speak about all the other cancelled Blue Sky movies. Starting with Alienology. It was confirmed in October of 2012 that Carlos Saldana would be directing the movie, and it would be based off the book with the same plot. But soon, it was cancelled. Then in 2018, Paramount would have the rights to produce it. Haunting hatches the egg. An obvious sequel to Haunting Hears a Who, based off the book in which Haunting must look after Maisie's egg while she is away. It got cancelled possibly because Audrey Giesel came to Universal and Illumination to make Dr. Seuss movies, because Universal had a big bond with Penguin of Ipanema. Here is a fact. This is what Rio was originally going to be. It was pitched in 1995 for Blue Sky by Carlos Saldana and would be released in 1998. The plot is, out of nowhere, a Galapagos penguin who was washed up on the beaches of Ipanema, later in for living the life of his adventure in hopes of finding himself. Neil Patrick Harris was intended to voice him, but could not be due to outside commitments, and it was also cancelled due to Carlos Saldana being aware of other Penguin movies like Happy Feet and Surf's Up, so he had to change it up into a smartly crafted movie, Rio, which could have been technically some first Blue Sky movie. Next, Santa Claus. Ever since Fox acquired Blue Sky, they were also developing William Joyce's book into an animated movie. It followed Santa Claus, asking 3 gifted children to help him defeat an army of dark elves and save Christmas. It was cancelled due to their problems on the production, alongside struggling to improve the CGI. Then it led to Ice Age and Robots. Another fact, it could have been also Blue Sky's first movie. Next, Spore. A movie based off Electronic Arts video game. Confirmed in 2009 to be directed by Chris Wedge. For years it was in development hell. The game became less popular and in the end was cancelled in 2019. Next, The Iguana Brothers. In 2003, there was going to be a movie based off the book. Also, Warner Brothers was going to make an adaptation of that as well. It was next, The Wainscot Weasel. It was confirmed in 2003, but then was scrapped in 2006. Never mattered anyway, because we already have a one-eyed weasel in a Blue Sky movie. Now, on to sequels. Ice Age 6. This was called Ice Age 6 The Extinction. It would be an emotional endgame, which lost a chance to happen due to Ice Age 5 failing. A lot of characters would be returning. Next, Rio 3! An interview about Rio 2. They said they really do have ideas for a third movie. There is also a chance for a spin-off about Pedro and Nico for Disney+, but it is uncertain to happen. Then in 2025, storyboards of Rio 3 by Lyubimir Azarov were leaked. We are seeing that Blue may have replaced an injured bird actor. Nigel would be wanting to take his place by disguising himself as Blue. I swear he's moralizing about the entertainment industry being a toxic workplace for animals. Like, you are aware of toxic work environments? I swear it would be worth it. It was never really completed, I apparently heard. Next, Robots 2! To have a sequel to Robots was considered by William Joyce, but in the end was cancelled to focus more on Ice Age, because they had to finish all the stories that were happening in general according to the Ice Tunnel scene. Now, onto the serious ones that were cancelled due to Disney and their closure, which is Anubis, based off the 2006 book by Bruce Sick, in which Chance Henry's archaeologist father accidentally awakens of an evil mummy who steals his soul. Chance risks becoming a mummy himself to rescue his father from the Egyptian underworld. Soon, it was set to be adapted into a movie by Blue Sky Studios. Once, it was intended to be released in 2016, and on that year, Ice Age 5 was released, because you've got to complete that Ice Tunnel story, and it is better than nothing. Soon, it was delayed to 2018, but then would have to be delayed again to avoid competition of other animated movies like Eyes Love Dogs and the unnecessary Sherlock Gnomes. 20th Century Studios pulled it off in June of 2017. No information since I believe Rami Malek could have been in it. He's Egyptian and he starred in quite a few 20th movies. I think 20th had a bit of bad timing, and I am considering buying a book of it. Next, Confessions of an Imaginary Friend. It was confirmed on May the 18th there would be a movie based off Michelle Cueva's memoir, and Martino would be directing. It was cancelled due to the closure, but soon will be revived for a Disney Plus and Disney Television apparently. Next, Foster. In 2018, there was going to be a musical animated movie made by Blue Sky themselves, with the producers of La La Land making its music. The plot was about a teenager who, after gets disappointed with the end of his favourite book saga, tries to talk to the author, but gets involved in an adventure in the world of his books. It was pulled off in May of 2019 and was cancelled due to the closure. Next, Franklin and Valeria. It was confirmed in July of 2017 there would be a movie done by Blue Sky based off the Marvel characters Franklin Richards and Valeria Richards, and it was cancelled due to Disney. Next, Frog Kisser. In September of 2016, it was confirmed that there would be a live-action CGI hybrid being done by Blue Sky Studios, being based off the book by Garth Nix. The plot was Princess Anya, who has the unfortunate ability to break curses with a magic kiss. When her evil stepmother's new husband, her evil stepfather, tries to take over the kingdom, Anya goes on the rush, with her unlikely companions, including a loyal talking dog, a boy thief, trapped in the body of a newt, and a mischievous wizard. The princess embarks on a quest to save the kingdom and uncover her magic potential. It was cancelled for unknown reasons, but possibly due to the closure. Next, Left Turn! A studio veteran, H.B. Lewis, described the plot as Home Alone, but with birds. Ryu had nothing to do with it. The reason nothing happened to it, I believe, is due to Disney and the closure. Next, Mutt! It was a shelved movie based off a comic strip of the same name, just like the Peanuts movie, by Patrick McDowell. In 2011, he collaborated with them to make a movie adaptation of it. Quietly, it was cancelled due to Disney and the closure. There were a few elements completed of it, just like Nimona, and the remaining media is animation tests in 2016, which I am showing right now. is a chance it may be made into a video game. Next. Oh my gods! A movie apparently developed in 2021, which would be about seeing the description of the concept art. A fox called Pico, who after being fired from his job would try to prove his worth to other details in order to become one of them. I spoke about cancelled Blue Sky movies around the people in person. They said it was their favourite, like due to the title. Again, like Anubis, I believe Rami Malek could have been in that too. Next. The Fright Stuff! In February 2018, it was confirmed that there would be a musical movie with Blue Sky's first female director, Karen Disher. Originally, it was scheduled due to 2023, then delayed and was cancelled due to the closure. Another example is Orbit! Learning about all these things breaks my heart even more. Now I'm going to say my big burning take. What Disney did ruin the movie industry. Disney is a company so rigid that whatever it owns cannot do movies based off things like The Sims. Most of Blue Sky's movies did not turn to franchises. Do you really need to Flanderize it due to the multiple Ice Age movies? Which were happening in general, remember? Because I saw the goodness in it. They were healthy with their animation, always doing it in-house, which was as good as, if not better than Pixar. Blue Sky deserved better than this. They deserve better than any other movie studio than the likes of Illumination. More lines that I am putting out. Look at all the things Blue Sky was going to do. Just like 20th Century Studios, anything they could do gets wasted. I wish 20th Century Studios was never bought. I wish it was always standing alone. More lines! Blue Sky has done as much as other animation studios. Not as much, which is baffling to me. These being making a live-action CGI hybrid. They were originally release more than one movie in a year, or even put an Owl City song into a movie soundtrack of theirs. A bonus I thought up would be collaborating with Aardman. No, that would not be practical. Now, to the next chapter. In an episode of a podcast, wait, don't tell me, John Leguizamo was a guest and he confirmed that a 6th Ice Age movie is being in development. And the news broke that Ice Age 6 would be officially happening, as confirmed by Disney.
Hello, everybody. Ray Romano here with some big news. Wow, it's cold in here. Did the AC break or something?
Hey, Ray, you ready to give the big announcement?
Sure am. Just give me a minute. Could somebody turn the heat up, please? What?
I see you got my gift.
What's happening?
I thought it'd be fun. Okay, tell him.
Ice Age 6 is coming to theaters.
There we go.
The herd is back, baby. I gotta call everybody I know.
Understand the controversy, knowing that people who are feeling tired with Ice Age installments being pumped, Blue Sky being gone, with Scrap finally having the nut whatsoever. At first, I was opposing to, but now I may be the only one who is up for it. Like many others were up for Shrek 5 until...
Ew, Dad.
Ooh, Mommy like. Who's making this stuff?
I may not be the only one. John Leguizamo is positive about this. If John Leguizamo spoke about it most, maybe Sid will be the focus. I always thought Manny was the main because of his family history. seemingly sympathy for him. And I swear it would be more emotional. Also, it was confirmed that the voice of Sid's mother, Joy Behar, would not be returning. Maybe Sid's mother will die, and a lot of people are anticipating for a chance to bring back Roshan all grown up, originally intending. How about they restore the original plot for this movie? Maybe Scrat and Baby Scrat can have quality time together instead of trying to have an acorn. Yeah, Rio 3 is waiting to happen, and I want in it Linda and Tulio having a child. A female child shaped like Linda. Cannot wait to see how Ice Age 6 is going to work, especially if 20th Century Studios distributes it. Also, can we please restore the cancelled Blue Sky projects at 20th Century Animation 2? Are you hearing me, Disney and 20th? As long as they are in theatres! Now, that is it. You can comment, give me a reaction, and even subscribe. Look at my ranking of the movies.
Oh, Blue. We should have never left Moose Lake. This is all my fault.
No, Linda, please. This is not your fault.
You're right. It's not my fault. It's your fault!
What?